Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I am back for part 2 of the Scene Trees. This features the new release from Anita Duram and Colorado Crafts. Super adorable stamps. We are going to be using the Dear Santa and the Best Gift Shrew. I did not know that that was a thing. We'll come back to that. But anyway, so if you have not hopped along, we had a blog hop yesterday, but there's still chance to enter. It's open through December 4th, and they are doing giveaways on each step along the hop, and they are also doing a large bundle giveaway to anybody who shops through our affiliate links. Mine is linked below next to the Colorado Crafts store. That is my link. But yeah, so good things, good opportunities to win, and also lots of crafty inspiration. Yesterday we did the video where we showed using the pre-created scene that's in the set, and today we're going to create our own scene with some masking, as well as talk about how to do the birch trees. Yesterday we did the pine. So here I'm using Eclipse masking tape. I am stamping down all of my masks. So I have this cute little mouse and the dog, and then in the bottom right hand corner you can see the little shrew, which are mammals, not rodents. I did some Googling. And then I'm also going to stamp the mailbox, which is a separate stamp. And then I will trim all of these out and use them to create my little scene, my little, is it wood? I guess there's trees, but there's a sidewalk. So I don't really think that that's like too rural, right? It's got sidewalks. So I'm going to go ahead and trim these out. I did that off camera, and I will tell you, for the little mouse, I did not end up using his tail. So now I like to use my masks to lay out my scene. I thought it would be super cute if the little mouse was getting a boost from his buddy, the little puppy dog, to get his letter into the mailbox. And so that was kind of the idea going into it. And then the little shrew fit in perfectly with his little box, just for something different. So once I have them where I want them, I'm going to use my masks. I'm going to put my stamps directly over where my masks are, so I know that my scene is going to stamp exactly how I want it to. I'm going to pick those up with the door of my Misty, and then I'm going to remove all of the masks. Normally I would just do this with my fingertips, but I have on dark nail polish, and I didn't want to risk that I would be kind of streaking it across my card front, and so that's why I use my tweezers. I am using Intense Black ink from Hero Arts, which is Copic safe. And for the little mouse, I'm not going to stamp his tail. I'm going to go in with a baby wipe and wipe that off. And the reason that I'm not using his tail is because it would directly cover my little dog's face. So I did have to go back in and do a little selective inking, but he came out fine. I know you might think like, oh, but he won't have a tail, it'll look weird, but it really will just look like his tail is somewhere else that we can't see it in the scene. And then once I have it stamped down, I'm going to put my masks in place, and then I'm going to continue stamping. When you're doing scene cards, you want to remember that whatever you want to see the most of, whatever should be in the front, gets stamped first, and whatever is in the back, or whatever you see the least of, gets stamped last. So my puppy dog's kind of my middle layer. I'm stamping him down, and then I will mask him also. And then finally the mailbox. Now, the reason that I created a mask for the mailbox as well is because I'm going to be doing some ink blending on top of my scene. But if you were doing your whole scene in Copic markers, you would not need to cut a mask for this one, unless you wanted it for placement purposes and like how to map out your scene, which I do think is beneficial. So this is the last one, stamping in my little mailbox. And then the stamping portion will be complete. Putting this mask in place, and then for the layers of the landscape, it's going to be the same thing. So I am masking first my sidewalk, and you can see I'm putting it at an angle here. This is just going to make my card a little bit more interesting instead of like a straight on shot. And then I used another piece of Eclipse masking tape. I'm going to create a little snowdrift or snow hill, however you want to look at it. And I'm going to trim these out with my scissors. I used one side of this, one for each card. So if you were doing genuine hills, you would want to keep both pieces so you could mask your sky. But since the snow, like the top portion of the snow is left white, I don't need both pieces. So once I have those in place, I'm just going to wrap my masks around the backside so I don't catch them with my ink blending. And then I am going to get started with the trees. So here, this is Eclipse masking tape again. You can see I'm going in. You do not need to cut these perfectly straight. They do not need to be even. They can be shaggy and wonky and weird shapes and sizes because that's how trees grow. So I'm cutting some strips. Some are fat, some are thin, some are, fatter at the bottom, skinnier at the top. And for some of them, I'm trimming them in half or 3/4 to create other trees. I did want some of my trees to be in the front of the snow and some of them to be a little bit further set behind. So I'm just going to keep adding these little masking strips to create the trees until I am happy with how many trees I have. After I do that, I am going to use my leftover pieces. Like you see, that one was just a little bit too short, and so I just moved it off to the side. And these are going to be my branches. You don't necessarily need to create branches, but they do add an extra layer or dimension to your scene. If you are just comfortable with the tree trunks, do that, and that will be cute too. So now I'm cutting them just a little thinner. Again, they're, a little bit wonky or, irregularly shaped, but tree branches are. So that's totally okay if they look like that. I am doing the same thing that I did with the snow mask. I'm just kind of wrapping them over the top. And this is just to help so that it doesn't catch when I'm doing my ink blending. You'll do see that like later on I do run into a little bit of a problem with that. So I just picked a couple of blue distressing. So you can obviously use any colors that you would like to for your sky. I'm going in first with Salty Ocean. I like to do my any ink blending. I was going to say my distressings, but any ink blending from lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, just like I do my Copic coloring. And I just feel like this really saturates the paper with ink and gives me a really nice blend. So I ran through the Salty Ocean with really no issues. And then when I got to the blueprint sketch, I'm going to bring it down, not completely covering the Salty Ocean, but just leaving like a little bit of a halo. But here you can see is where I'm running into a little bit of the issue. So I just took some low tack tape and kind of taped that branch down. I will tell you that this was not a permanent solution. I ended up like holding it in place while I did my ink blending. And that's honestly because once it gets pulled up, the distress ink has created some moisture on the paper. And that means that it doesn't really, like your tape doesn't really stick that well. Like you can see there, one of them came up. So I just try to be conscientious and making sure that I'm going in the direction that isn't going to pull it up, and then I hold it with my finger where I can. That isn't usually a problem, but in this case, because I think I had such thin pieces, it was. So from Blueprint Sketch onto the Chip Sapphire, and you don't need to make like I said, you can use any colors you want. I chose to make mine a little bit darker with the Chip Sapphire and then the black soot, more of like a night scene. But you don't have to do that. The reason I chose to make a little bit of a darker background is because I knew I was going to make it snow and I wanted to be able to see my snow and it's easier to see at night. So here we're just working our way back through to that lightest color. Like I said, overlapping the colors each time, coming down just a little bit farther and leaving just like that halo of a lighter color around the edge of the snow. You do want to take your sky color all the way to the edge of the snow because that is what creates the snow drift, because the top of it is just going to be white. So we have to kind of outline it with the colors that are around it. So once that part is done, I am removing the snow masks, but I'm not removing the tree masks. So I'm just kind of like wiggling it out from underneath there and then leaving the trees in place. I am going to add some shading to my snow with a shaded lilac. I like a blue violet for my snow, but I felt like my sidewalk was just a little bit too high up and I didn't have enough snow. So normally I would not use this type of tape. This is the satin low tack tape from Altenew. Normally for a straight edge, I would use my Scotch masking tape, but for some reason I could not find, I still can't find it. I don't know where it went. So I used this instead and it worked very well, but I had to be very careful with my other masks. So I would recommend the Scotch tape. Not like the Scotch masking tape. Don't use Scotch tape. That'll rip your paper. And so anyway, I'm adding the shading with my shaded lilac to the top and then just a little bit to the bottom and that little bit in that bottom corner. Once I get my masking removed, it just looked like it was a little blank down there and I wanted there to be a little bit of extra color. So I just went in, I didn't even pick up any extra ink. I just used what was left on my foam and just added a little shading there. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove all of my masks and you'll be able to see the trees that we created. Super simple, really easy. These trees that just kind of pop up out of nowhere. I love removing masks. It is one of my favorite parts of scene cards to just kind of see everything up here. You can also, if you wanted to make it a fuller forest, you could go in with Copic markers and draw in some more trees in between them. I'm not going to do that, but that is an option. Maybe we'll do that on a different card. So for the sidewalk, I used a ruler and I went with my mid-tone. I just went with a C3 to draw the line that isn't there from the masking. And then I decided to make the width of my sidewalk panels the same width as my ruler, just because that was easier. So I just used that to make a couple of lines. And I did have to do them at an angle, just like I did the masking, so that it would make sense. Because if I just did them straight, the sidewalk wouldn't look correct. So once I have that done, I'm going to go in with my lightest color. I apologize for not showing them to you. I used a C1, a C3, and a C5, and then later on brought in a C7. So from each kind of, I'm going in with the C5 now to put in the outline for each panel, and then also just kind of outlining the sidewalk itself, like where it meets the snow. I'm also adding a little bit of shading underneath my characters, just because, it gives them some ground to kind of stand on that would make sense because they would be blocking the light on the sidewalk where they were standing. So I just added a little bit of shading to the left and right of each square and then blended that back out. You know what? I told you I used a C3, but what I ended up doing, because my C3 needed to be refilled, you can see it there, I ended up grabbing a C4 because that one was filled. I was totally rushing to get this done. On this particular day, is the first night that Miss Katie Caitlin did not feel great, and so I was rushing to kind of finish up what I was doing so that I could go pick her up. So once that's all blended out, I did end up, like I said, going back in with a C7, and I used that to just reinforce those lines for each square and then also add just like an outline to the sidewalk, because there would be some shadows where it would meet that snowdrift. And then the sidewalk is complete. We're going to move on then to adding a little bit of a shadow underneath our shrew in the snow, and then along each side of the sidewalk into the snow. And again, I just did like really simple lines for the shading underneath the tree. I wasn't sure about the ones in the background, like if they were going to be in the front or in the back. So I just did the one I knew I wanted to be up front, just added a little line of shading underneath that. And then we're going to go in and shade the trees. And this is where I'm going to decide if they're in the front or in the back. I chose warm grays for this. Cool grays will also work. So will neutrals and toners. birch trees are more on the gray side versus brown, but I'm sure there's some, more gray browns that you could also use. When you're going through and adding the shading, I just kind of added shading to the left and right hand side, but you'll need to decide if you want your branches to be in front of a tree or behind. And if they're going to be in front, then you'll want to add shading to the left and right hand side of the branch, like above it and below it, so that it will look as though it is in front of that other tree. Why can't I think of the word I want? Tree. Really, Kelly? Honestly? I keep thinking bark, but that's not it. Trunk. Oh my word. Oh my goodness gracious. So the branch looks like it is in front of the other tree trunk. From there, really, you're just going to add little dash lines. Some can be skinny, some can be fat, some can be on top of each other. They can overlap, they can be long, they can be short, they can go across the whole trunk, they can stop short. But birch trees are really forgiving, which is why it's one of the easiest trees to add into your scenes and still be really happy with your results. So the one that I'm adding in now is a W3. And this is just a mid-tone, and you can see how these trees are kind of starting to take shape and come to life. So for this tree here, I put it in front of the tree branch. So the branch will be behind it. It will have more shading. For this tree here, I put it behind this tree branch. And so you can see how I'm adding shading, just like continuing that line so that it makes the branches look like they are in front. So we went all the way out to this W5. I will use it again to add shading, usually on the underside of my branches, but then also to continue these little dashed lines that we would see in birch trees. So super easy, super quick way to get like really good results without having, because the majority of them are white. So you don't have to spend a ton of time doing a lot of coloring. It's really just shading on either side of the trunk, shading on either side of the branch, and then these little dash marks that just kind of bring them to life. And if you change your mind, that's why we start with our lightest color, because maybe you thought you wanted a branch in front of it, but now you've decided you don't. That's fine. If you've only been in with your lightest color, you can totally fix it. And even if you've been in with your darkest, you can take a colorless blender and make it work. So once I was done with my C5, I went back in with my C3 and just kind of filled in any areas where I thought that maybe I had missed something or it looked a little spotty. But really no way to go wrong with these kinds of trees. They're very easy to introduce. And if you missed yesterday's talks about the pine trees, which requires no masking and is even easier. So now that I knew what trees were going to be in the front and in the back, now I went in and continued adding my shading to my snow. For the top of the mailbox, I added shading with my cool grays again, and then blended that out with the BV colors. Since my snow is this blue-violet color in the scene, it makes sense for the snow to be this blue-violet color in the, what is this? On top of the mailbox. So, yeah, this one is... I like being able to create my own scenes, and that's one of my favorite things about the Anita and Colorado Crafts, like, because she does have this cute pre-built scene, but then she gives you all the characters to kind of make your own story, which I totally love. So let's talk about this shrew, right? I had no idea. To me, like, I Googled it when I got the set, and I was like, best gift shrew, like... The only definition that I know of a shrew is, this is what Google says. An unpleasant woman who is easily annoyed and who argues a lot. Listen, guys, I'm a shrew. Straight up, I'm a shrew. Ask my husband, he'll back me up hard. But An actual shrew, this adorable little present-giving shrew, is a mole-like mammal. So, true shrew, this is what the Google says. Basically, welcome to Google with Kelly. True shrews are not to be confused with tree shrews, otter shrews, or elephant shrews. And now I need to know what an elephant shrew is. So they're not a rodent, just to be clear. They're a mammal, but they are not classified. They're not a rodent. I thought for sure looking at them they would be. Also, the rodents have, this is something else I learned. Welcome to National Geographic with Kelly Taylor. That rodents have like the buck teeth, for biting things. Shrews have sharp teeth. Look at how cute that little face is. Sharp teeth in there, guys. And that is a big difference between the shrew and a rodent. Fascinating stuff here. Colorado Crafts is teaching me all kinds of stuff because I hear these things and I need to know, so then I Google them. So back to the card. What you're really here for. Maybe you're also here to learn what a shrew is. I don't know. So I colored my little mouse with my warm grays, and then I colored the shrew with the same warm grays. And I wanted something different. And so instead of trying to recolor him altogether, or her, I just went in with a medium brown, that E55, and just colored right over top of it. For my dog, I kept him a little lighter. I went in with a E53, a 55, and a 57. And I'm adding shading to his chest because that's blocked by his arm. I'm adding shading to more of the front of his body. And then where Anita has drawn his little fur, I'm also doing some flicks of color just to give him some texture. Because I did these two cards simultaneously, I know I told you guys this yesterday, but because I did them simultaneously, you'll see that some of the things were colored on one and some of them were colored on the other, and the mailbox is a very good representation of that, because I did not know that I was going to split this into two parts. I didn't know I was going to have, and I should have, realistically. I've been making scene cards long enough to know how long one of these video is and why I was trying to fit two cards into one. I do not have an answer for you. But I think just because I was excited about the trees. So I was like, oh, I'll do it this way and I'll do it this way. And then I'll have, almost 3 hours of footage that I try to condense into a 30-minute video. And that didn't work out. So instead, we got two almost 30-minute videos. So for the mailbox, I added the shading mostly on the right-hand side because that's where all the activity is. So you want to add shading any place that 2 points meet and any place where there's one object on top of another. So clearly these, animals are putting their letters in, they're standing in front of this mailbox, they would be blocking light with their bodies and their letters and things like that. And so there would be more shadows there. Whereas on the left-hand side, there is no little note for Santa. There's not any animals. So there would be a lot of light that would be hitting that left-hand side of the mailbox. And so it's going to be much lighter because of that. Some of you have asked me recently, like, I think I've seen 2 or 3 comments just in the last couple of days about like color combinations. And just so you are aware, while I'm not super active on my blog, I mean, really only when I have part of a blog hop, like this video is part of a blog hop. I do have my cookbook recommendations on a page on my blog that is always there and always available for you to check out. There are links to purchase, but it does just link my most used combinations. And so if you're interested in that, I will try to link it below. This is a pretty heavy, YouTube only gives you so many characters to fill your description with. So sometimes I can link stuff and sometimes I cannot, because I try to link the items that I use in case anybody is looking for something specific. So now that the mailbox is colored, I went in and did the little Shrew's bow tie, adorable, red as well. And then I also did the dog's collar red. Apparently I cut it out. I didn't mean to. My apologies. I used green, which was a G17 for the present that the box present that the shrew is holding. I used green, and now I'm just filling in those polka dots with blue, as well as my little mouse on top. I filled his scarf in with blue as well. And then I believe that is the entirety of the coloring. So I have this little gold metallic pen. I use that to fill in the license on the dog. That was the word that tripped me up yesterday, was license. And now here I'm going to add my snow. Like I told you in yesterday's video, I do intend to do a video soon about different ways to add snow to your scenes. But this is the way that I am doing it today, which is the white gel pen. So I just get it started either on my finger or a scrap piece of paper, and then I just do a series of dots. This probably seems like it would take a long time, but it really goes by very fast. The key to the snow in not making it look like stars is that you have to put the snow all over everything, which means you also have to put it over your characters. Because if they were out in the snow, they would in fact be being snowed on. But I am conscientious of like trying not to put it directly over like their eyeballs or, something like that where it would alter the image in some way. But if you do the little series of dots all over the scene, it will genuinely look like snow and it will be adorable. And here it is, adorable. So as you guys know, yesterday, the sentiments for this gave me kind of a hard time. And actually, the sentiments aren't even from this set. They are from, I think, the Winter Wonderland set. But I originally thought that I would stamp them, heat emboss them, and then do some ink blending. It was not good. It did not look good. And so I ended up turning them black with my distress ink. But if I had to do it all over again, I would have white heat embossed them on black on labels to begin with. So now that we're at the very end of the video, I did just want to note for those of you who had asked, Caitlin is doing better. She was not 100% last night, but she was probably 85. Like, she is definitely starting to feel a little bit better. She slept really good, was a happy girl this morning, ate her breakfast and all of that. Like, just really, she's on the mend until the next whatever sickness we get. Hopefully there's a little bit of a break and she's not too down during the holiday season, but we will see how it goes. For this, just something to note, I am using the foam blender to just kind of make sure it gets in between all the letters, and then using a damp baby wipe just to kind of buff across the top and clean them up. I did end up putting them on faux tape, so it's not a true one layer card, which is a little bit disappointing, but I seem to have lost my touch. I seem to have lost my touch with my true one layer cards. I need to figure out a way to get back to it so that I am happy with my sentiments and their placement. Sometimes I just get caught up making the scene. So that is it. That is both cards. If you missed the Pine Tree one, I will link it at the end of the video for you to check out. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.